Well, we're going to go ahead and get started today since it's right at 11 and I want to keep us on a good schedule for this. So today we're going to talk about caregiving and what you need to know as maybe your parents are getting older or you're thinking about stuff for yourself, preparing for your children. So that's going to be our topic for today. And I know this is in the time of COVID and not being able to be at hospitals and visit with people. It's always good to think about this, but especially now, it's kind of changed how things go. If this is your first time joining a webinar by me, my name is Lauren Ward. I'm an attorney with a business law firm here in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I'm a graduate of USC School of Law, and my practice areas are estate planning, Medicaid planning, and business planning. So today we're going to talk about what conversations should we be having with our parents or our children on long-term caregiving? What documents are essential? What are optional? What is Medicaid versus Medicare in terms of coverage? And a lot of people ask this question of, does a revocable trust protect my assets? So we're going to go over all of those today, and then we'll definitely have time if anybody has questions. So the first thing is, what discussions do I need to be having either with my parents or if I'm planning for long-term care for myself? What do I need to be thinking about? And I think the big things we need to think about is, how am I going to pay for the care I may or may not need in the future? And that's always a hard conversation to have. I know most of us do not want to think about the nursing home situation, don't want to think about having to have constant caregivers, but it is a reality for a lot of people to need this long-term care. So I think we have to think about the different ways that we're going to be able to pay for it. One thing we always want to talk about is long-term care insurance. Do your parents have this? Do you have this? It could be a good option because sometimes that'll allow you to for money to be used to pay for nursing home care. It could be allowed to pay for at home to have people come in your home and take care of you. But this is always a conversation you need to have with your attorney and with your financial advisor to see if it's really valuable for you, because sometimes the value isn't there if you're a certain age. But if you already have this in place, that's definitely one of those things you can use to do for long-term care. What all assets do your parents plan to use if you need to pay for constant care and supervision? It's important to kind of understand what the person's income stream is. So usually when we think of retirement income, we think of somebody having usually three different types of income. They have their Social Security, they have their savings, and usually they have some type of 401k, IRA, or pension plan. So it's important to know what is coming in each month to know for planning, do I need to put some more money aside? Is there money that I need to put in a trust? Would I qualify for Medicaid based on my income? So that's always something that's a conversation to have and know these things to help plan in the future. If maybe, will I qualify for Medicaid or not? If I'm not going to qualify, do I know I have assets that I could use to pay for my care? Do I want to look at, there's things with nursing home care you're going to have to think about, do I want private care, and knowing the costs and fees associated with that. I think a good discussion to always have is, do you want to stay at home or assisted living? Do you want to stay in your home? Do you want to downsize? Because all this comes into play when we're working out a plan for your parents or you. For instance, if you're wanting to stay in the home, there's programs through Medicaid that allows people to come into your home and help you, to have nurses and those type things. There's also, with the long-term care aspect, they usually allow for home health as well. If you're wanting to downsize your home, are we going to make sure we do it the best way possible for making sure that we've protected this asset in the future? And what programs are offered that we need to look into that can help with care? So I think it's important to know what is available to you. So what's available in your area? Are there certain programs? For instance, South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, sometimes there's programs through that allow for home care, allow for things like updating your home, adding, a ramp if you need it, changing your bathroom. There's all types of programs, but we need to know what's available in your area. And sometimes that's coming to an attorney to talk with me, or an attorney that deals with this are doing some kind of Google searching ahead of time. So you'll see what you have. And then we want to know, what are your countable assets and income? Because that's going to determine if you're eligible for Medicaid, or if we're going to have to look into private pay in those type situations. I did get a question. So my parents don't financially qualify for Medicaid, but if they are being cared for at home, do they qualify for any services or supplies through Medicaid or Medicare? And yes, there's possibilities your parents could get certain medical supplies will be covered through Medicare, making sure you're making the most out of those things that are offered through Medicaid or Medicare if you don't qualify for Medicaid. So I think other discussions we need to have with our parents is to know where your assets are located. If we're going to put a plan into place, or we're going to help you get care and long-term care provided, we need to know what you have. We also need to know who are your contacts for things like life insurance, 401ks, IRAs, attorneys, accountants, etc. So that way we know what you have, what you're working with, to be able to make the best plan possible for you. One thing to go ahead and ask your parents too, or you, if you're doing this for yourself, have I done any asset protection? What does my estate plan mean? And what does my asset protection plan mean? So I think those are things that you definitely need to have a discussion with your parents about. And if you're unsure, that's kind of where you can call and talk to your attorney, your financial advisor, or somebody to give you some guidance. But I think the big things we need to have discussions with our parents about are, what have you done? What estate plans do you have? What assets do you have? Where are they? How are they titled? Have we done anything to protect us if we want to qualify for Medicaid? Have we done any planning on that? Or have we just done an estate plan? And I think the difference is, when you do an estate plan, you're not thinking of long-term care. If you're thinking of long-term care, maybe when you're older, and you're in your, I usually say you want to start this, 60s plus. You're definitely not going to do this when you're 30 years old. But am I thinking of, how am I going to pay for long-term care services? That's the part of the conversation you need to have with your parents is, did I talk about this with the attorney? Was I doing stuff for asset protection for Medicaid, or was I doing just more of an estate plan to avoid probate? But I think knowing what assets are there, what the income stream is, and what your parents have in terms of insurance, long-term care, IRAs, 401ks is a really good start to making a plan for everything. So kind of knowing what those assets are so we can go in deeper into making a plan is the first thing. So the next thing is, so we've talked about stuff, we're ready to kind of start making a plan. What do my parents really have to have? So in today's time, I think the must-haves that every person needs to have is a durable power of attorney, a healthcare power of attorney, and possibly a do not resuscitate, depending on the situation, if that's what the person wants. But with the durable power of attorney, that allows somebody to step in and do finances for you. So if you're incapacitated, they can, who you appoint, your power of attorney can come in and they could handle making plans for you for long-term care. They could deal with the finances. They could deal with government entities for you. They can deal with Social Security. They can deal with Medicaid. They can deal with your own retirement plans, your own pension plans. I think now more than ever, the healthcare power of attorney is very vital for everyone to have. I think with the healthcare power of attorney, in today's time of COVID, people aren't being allowed visitors to the hospital. And with that, you are going to need to have that healthcare power of attorney so they know who to call. And sometimes you want to go ahead and have your decisions made for yourself if you're the individual. So that allows you to decide on organ donation, life support, feeding tubes. But it's essential to have this document and to have it on file with your doctor's office at this point. If you do have an emergency situation and you're in the hospital and they're not allowing visitors, it's vital for the people at the nurses and the doctors to know who to contact and what your wishes are in this situation, because you may not have anybody there to speak for you. And this document is going to have to do it and have to direct them to the right people. So I think essentials, you have to have that durable power of attorney and you have to have that healthcare power of attorney. I say this anytime, but right now, especially the medical side of things, you want to have that document taken care of and in place. So when looking at this, there's kind of other documents we think are important that your parents may need to have, but Things like a will. I mean, I think that's just basic for everybody to have, just to have that basic estate plan. A trust, possibly revocable or irrevocable. And we'll talk a little bit more about the irrevocable trust as we go through and how we can use that as a tool for asset protection planning. And personal property memorandum. So this has been really important in the past for people to have. I've actually litigated cases over personal property. This goes with your will or trust, and it allows your parent or you to handwrite on a piece of paper how they would want their personal property assets to be distributed. For instance, if they want their wedding band to go to their son and their diamond to go to their daughter, they put that on this. And so it does tend to help in situations where there could be potential for different family members wanting different things, and it takes tension away after you're no longer here. But those things I think are, while not as essential as the healthcare power of attorney, I think they're very important to have. And I think it's important during this time of COVID to go ahead and get those done earlier rather than later. Right now, it is hard. Typically, attorneys don't mind if you have mental capacity going to the hospital and executing a will with you. For instance, if you've had, heart surgery or you're in the cancer ward or anything like that, we don't mind coming to help you. But right now, we're having a lot of trouble getting into the hospitals, and sometimes we're allowed in, sometimes we're not. And then the other issues, we have to have witnesses. So it's been a different time for us to be able to do this for people. And for people in nursing homes, we're not able to get in those right now. Hopefully that'll change. But if somebody needs to have their will done and they're in a nursing home and they have mental capacity and they're able to do this, as attorneys, we can't get in there. And a lot of times there's issues with the staff being able to help and those type things. So I think it's important, if you're wanting to have these documents done, to do them sooner rather than later. While I'm hoping things will change soon and we'll be able to get in hospitals and nursing homes to help more, at this point it's really hard for us. So if that's something that comes up for your family in the near future, it may be hard to get these documents executed. So we need to do these things while we're well, and we can do them without having to be in the hospital or the nursing home. So the biggest thing I kind of want to talk about is Medicare versus Medicaid and how that helps in long-term care planning. So Medicare, and I think a lot of people get these two terms confused. They're very similar names, and that may have been not the best way to call them because they're two very separate programs. So Medicare is a health insurance program for all people age 65 and over, or who have received Social Security disability benefits for a minimum of 24 months. So Medicare is available for all those ages 65 and older, and it's just a basic insurance program. I mean, a lot of people still have their secondary policy, but it's an insurance program. They sometimes will pay for 1 month of nursing home rehab care. Usually they'll pay for about 30 days of Medicare, but it's not going to be there to pay for your long-term care and nursing home stay. It is not going to be what's going to cover the fees associated with nursing home. It can cover medicines, it can cover things like surgeries, operations, all of that, like an insurance would, but it's not going to cover the cost of long-term care. So while Medicare is a great program and it is needed for the insurance component of things, it's not what we're looking for when we're thinking about long-term care planning. When we're thinking about long-term care planning, we're thinking more about Medicaid is what covers the expenses for in hospitals, the expenses for not at hospitals, but nursing homes. So that way, Medicaid is what covers those long-term care programs. So there's multiple programs with Medicaid, but what we're going to focus on is to discuss the individuals in nursing facilities and are receiving home and community-based waivers. So this is for the elderly that need the nursing home care, full-time care level. So with Medicaid, who's eligible for it? You have to be a South Carolina resident, a U.S. citizen, or lawful resident alien. You have to require nursing facility level care. And so that's one prong of it. So with Medicaid, there's kind of two prongs you have to look at. One is, do I qualify physically? You have to meet that physical qualification. And the second would be, do I qualify financially? But the first thing is, do you require nursing facility level of care? It does not mean that you're in a nursing home. You can reside in a medical institution or receive home and community-based waivers. And you have to have a social security number. So that we talked about the physical side. The doctors have to say that's not a legal determination, that is a medical determination. And there's different things they look at. Are you able to feed yourself? Are you able to care for yourself, bathe yourself, handle your day-to-day transactions? And if you're not, then you're probably at the physical level of Medicaid care. That's usually not where most people have the hurdle. The hurdle comes in with the income asset limits. So for an individual, and these change every year, but they go up a little bit, but not much. You can have about $2,349 of monthly income. You can have, if you're a spouse, you can keep of your spouse's income, you can keep $3,216 for a spousal allowance. You can have your own income, and that doesn't count against your spouse. So when we think of Medicaid and married couples, we have the well spouse and we have the Medicaid spouse. So the well spouse can have unlimited income, but in situations where maybe the well spouse never had their own income, maybe they didn't work, they don't have their own Social Security or retirement plans, they are allowed to keep $3,216 of the spouse's income. So this is only in a situation where the well spouse doesn't have their own income stream. If they have their own income stream, that's not counted against the spouse in need. You can have $2,000 in assets and $63,000 for a spouse. There are assets that aren't going to count against you, such as your house, your car, your personal belongings. Those things aren't going to count against you for Medicaid. So some people want to make sure that they can qualify for Medicaid to be able as part of their long-term care planning. And I will have a full webinar later on about Medicaid planning if that's something you're interested in. But there's things you can do ahead of time that may help you qualify for Medicaid if that's what you need to use to qualify to have for long-term care. We can look at things like possibly creating an irrevocable trust, but we have to do these things way ahead of time. So Medicaid has a 5-year look back program. So we're having to do these before we're needing care, which makes it a little bit harder when we're trying to plan. But we can look at things like possibly creating an irrevocable trust and putting our assets in that. We could use life estates for our real property, which means I own it for my life, and then at my death, it automatically may pass to my children. We may look at gifting away some assets while we're able to do so. But all of this, once again, has to be done within that 5-year time frame before you need Medicaid. So if you're going to apply for Medicaid in 2020 or 2021, they're going to look back to 2016 and see how you spent your money. And if you've done gifting, if you have given away assets, you're going to be penalized for that. But if you've done it before the 5-year mark, you're not going to be penalized and you can protect those assets. So if we're trying to think for our parents that they're going to need Medicaid, we're going to need to put a plan into place before they actually need that Medicaid. We want to make sure that we have it in place a good while before, which is when you're in your 60s to early 70s, you definitely want to think about this plan. And so the last thing I kind of want to, we will have a webinar later on just on basic Medicaid planning. I just want to talk about as one aspect of long-term care planning. And a lot of questions I get is, does my revocable trust protect my assets? So a revocable trust is not going to protect your assets in terms of Medicaid purposes. Those assets are yours. So you put your house, you put some bank accounts and those things in your revocable trust. That's great. It's going to protect it for probate purposes. It's going to make it easier for your family, but it's not a way to protect for Medicaid purposes if you're wanting to qualify for that. So a revocable living trust is a great tool to use for probate protections, to make things easier for your family, to have all your assets in one place and avoid probate. But for Medicaid purposes, it isn't going to protect you. It is just going to be counted as if those assets are yours. So that's what I talk about for Medicaid. The type of trust that will protect you is possibly that irrevocable trust with very specific income and residue beneficiaries. These trusts are complicated and they're very specifically crafted for each client. So this irrevocable trust is not a one size fits all, and it may not be an option for something your family wants to consider. But when we're thinking of long-term care, this could be one of the options you want to consider. So overall, I think it's important, just as a summary of everything we've talked about today, long-term care planning has to come into play before you actually need the long-term care. If you wait until you're actually needing long-term care, you may not be able to do what you wanted to do previously. So for instance, we have to think about that long-term care insurance ahead of time. We have to think about what income streams we have to be able to pay for this. Are we going to think about Medicaid? So I think when we're thinking of long-term care, we need to have that conversation with our parents who are going to be the caregivers for. Do you have the funds that you're going to be able to pay for your long-term care? Do you have that long-term care insurance? If you don't have stuff like that already put aside, are you planning on Medicaid taking care of you? Do you meet the qualifications for that? Or if you don't have the long-term care plan, but you do want Medicaid to be the one that covers your expenses, have I made a plan for that? Will I qualify? What do I need to do? So I think in terms of planning, we need to know what do we have available now and what are we going to have as a plan moving forward. And we have to look at the total picture of all your assets, all your income, your insurance policies, and what you have. And so, for instance, when paying for long term care and nursing home care, sometimes it could be more financially um, the easiest way is to pay for private nursing home care, which is cheaper than using a nursing home that takes Medicaid patients if you're not going to qualify for Medicaid. It could be looking at having that long-term care insurance that's paid for individuals to come to your house. It also could be looking to see what agency you're a part of for Medicaid to see if there's other services you could qualify for, such as receiving supplies, receiving stuff to update your home to make sure that you is livable for you. So I think it's looking at the total picture and making that plan ahead of time and not waiting until you need the long-term care. So it's not a conversation we want to have. Nobody wants to think about this, but having that conversation early on to know what your parents plan on doing for this and knowing what responsibility you're going to have is important because we want to make sure that we have a plan in place for long-term care. And while we're doing this, we want to make sure we have some type of estate plan in place. We want to make sure we have those healthcare powers of attorney in place. Those are very vital. We need those now more than ever with people not being able to go in the hospital with them. And this is important to give a copy to your doctor's office and to give a copy to your agents as well. But it is important to have this on file with your doctor's office. And depending on what doctor you go to, you may have to take it to multiple doctors if they're in different systems or if they're all part of the same system, if they're all part of regional or Prisma, just depends. But it's important now more than ever to have that healthcare power of attorney and to have that durable power of attorney. And now with COVID and the way things are and attorneys not being able to get into hospitals and nursing homes, it's important to have these documents like your will or your trust or whatever estate plan you want to go ahead and get that in place as soon as possible. We're hoping things will change and we can get back in to help people in those situations. But right now, with the way things are, it's important to have those put into place. So if something happens and you end up in the hospital or you end up in a situation and you haven't got that will done and you want it done, we may not be able to help as much as we normally could. So we want to get it done ahead of time so you have your wishes made known. That was kind of, this was just a very high level intro to this. We'll go more into Medicaid planning and dealing with long-term care costs and retirement planning in the future. But I just wanted to have kind of a quick webinar to kind of introduce the topic, and we'll dive down into these topics further in future webinars. So definitely keep looking at my emails. I'm trying to do one of these a month in the future, but I definitely will be giving some more in-depth topics on this. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chat me right now or feel free to email me after the fact. Here is my contact information. That's our phone number, 864-699-9801, and my email, lew@abizlaw.com. And I'm happy to try to answer any questions for you, but I'm happy to try to answer any questions you may have now. If anybody has one, feel free to unmute yourself or send me a chat. Well, I thank you all for joining me today. I hope this was informative and helpful. We will have more that go more in depth on these topics in the future. So keep looking out for emails or my LinkedIn or Facebook so you can see what we have coming up. But thank you all for joining. And please feel free to reach out to me for any questions in the future.